Hey there, good morning. Welcome to the JeepSolid garage. I got a few issues going on with my project Jeep here. I ended up having to kind of hotwire the ignition. The ignition switch was giving me all kinds of trouble. Let me show you that real quick. On the inside of the Jeep here, I've got the dash partially taken apart, but that's a different thing I'm working on. I'll show you guys that as well. But if you look here, the ignition cylinder is gone. I ended up taking that out, which then, to start my Jeep, I had to remove the ignition switch down here and start it down there, and I'll show you what all this wiring down here I'm working on. So on the ignition switch down here, I've had to diagnose what all these different wires are, and I think I've got it figured out now where this red one here, this is hot all the time, so let me stick a wire in here. And then this on the left here, this yellow one, this is the starter, so listen to this. There we go. And the ignition switch here, I mean, it's a little bit of a hassle to get to, but it only takes 2 bolts to take off. I'll show you a quick video of removing it. So once you got those 2 bolts off and that rod just slides out of the middle there, this side actually, I even labeled this side, accessory, off, on, and start. But once those 2 bolts are out and that rod, little push rod slides out, then you can bring it down here where you can work on it. But my trouble is I had to diagnose what all the different wiring was here. So to do that, I went through and made a little diagram and tested all the wires. This might look kind of confusing, but if you look at it one piece at a time, it's really not that bad. Don't pay any attention to this down here. This is when I actually opened up the switch, and I thought I would figure out what connected where when it was in different positions, but that ended up being just too confusing. But when I tested the wires up here, I was able to kind of figure out what everything did. So we've got the big red wire, and that's just hot all the time. The black and white wires, there's 2 of them down here. Those are grounds. This orange one over here, I don't think it does anything. I don't know what that does. I'll actually talk about that in just a second. The black and white up here is hot when it's on accessory or when it's on. The blue is hot when it's in the on position, and the yellow is hot for the starter. So let's look at how I figured that out. So if I take my handy little test light, I'm going to clip it onto a good ground over here. That should do it. And then so I mapped out all those wires. If we go to the big red wire with the ground, it's got power. And all the others, none of them have power with the switch in the off position. That's the red one right there. So then if I move the switch to a different position, let's put it on accessory. Now this black and white one off to the side here, now it has power. So I just went through all the different positions, figured out which wires were hot when. These bottom ones here, I figured out that was the ground. And to do that, I'm gonna use my multimeter here, put it over on ohms. Right now it says open loop. Let me take the black lead here. I'm just going to clip it onto the body here. I'm going to take the red one, and if I touch the body of the Jeep, it says 0.5, 0.4, so that shows that I have a conductivity there, right? So it goes all the way through. What's it saying 1 now? There we go, 0.3. And now if I put this probe in the black and white wire on the bottom here, 0.5, so I have conductivity through there, so I know that that bottom one is a ground. So now that I have that all figured out, I can go through and redo my switch and starter and everything, put in a new key, so I have all that right here. So a new start button, a switch, a little ignition key. So I'm excited to get all of that wired up and get my new switch in here, new ignition switch and everything. That'll be so nice. I did mention I had the dash apart, got the hood up and working under the hood a little bit as well. And I added some safety, anti-theft features to my Jeep as well. Some good things to think about and some of the options that I went with. You can very easily add a tracker to your Jeep or to your vehicle. Simply, if you want to go as simple as just placing an air tag, that's a really easy way to do it. There's other devices that'll do the same thing. Another one is adding a good kill switch. That's a good idea as well. Adding a thermal detonator, putting the C-diff cultures around it, whatever you need to do to protect your vehicle. And I've taken some of those precautions myself. So I added some of those features, but I'm not really discussing specifics because that's my vehicle's security and I don't want to give away all my secrets. So I got my little guide here and I've figured out what I want to wire to what here. So I'm gonna end up cutting this red hot all the time. And I'm gonna put 3 little splices, I think, over one to the key here, which is gonna be hot when I turn the key on. Then another one to the switch, which will be hot when I flip the switch on, and that'll go to the fuel pump. But another leg of it over to the starter button, so that the little starter button will light up when you flip the switch on. It'll be really cool looking. And then the start button will light up and I'll push that to start the Jeep. That'll be super cool. I'm gonna start by disconnecting the battery because I'm going to be cutting that hot wire and working on electrical underneath there is probably just a smart idea. And I'm going to start by cutting the red wire. You cut the red or the blue? Oh no! I'm going to cut the red wire. I'm going to cut it up here a little bit, so if I had to splice it back together, I could. But I want to leave myself enough wire to work with this switch. Cutting the red wire. There it goes. My Jeep will not run right now. And I mentioned earlier that this black and orange wire on the side here, that it does nothing. And the way I figured that out is I actually took the plug out and removed this old black and orange wire. I took it out and put everything back together, and everything ran and seemed to operate just fine without that black and orange wire. I looked at a diagram. I tried to figure out what it went to. I couldn't really find anything. If you guys know, leave a comment. Let me know, what does this black and orange wire do? As far as I can tell, it's just for looks. Here I've got 3 pieces of wire that I'm going to turn into hot leads. One for the key, one for the switch to turn like the fuel pump and all that on, and then one for the starter. I'm going to splice in all 3 of these, solder them in here real good. I'll show you the finished product there. Not a professional solderer, but I can make it work. All right, we're adapting, we're overcoming, we're recreating here. Leave a comment if you want, because I know there is better ways to do things. So I don't need 3 different separate hot wires coming off this, because if I have to the key, to the switch for the fuel pump and all that, and then to my start button, if I've got 3 different hot wires going there, then the key being on doesn't really matter if there's a hot wire going to the fuel pump already. You'll be able just to go over and flip the fuel pump on and it'll get power, which I don't necessarily want unless the key's on. So what I need to do is I'm gonna bring a hot wire, red wire, up to the key and give it power. Then when the key's on, have a hot wire coming off of that going over to the switch. And then that'll give power to that. And then when the fuel pump is on, then that'll then send a hot wire signal over to the start button, right? I'm not a professional electrician. Wiring is always, like I've mentioned in my videos in the past, wiring can be so confusing to me sometimes. But I work through it and figure it out. Help me along, leave a comment. If you've got tips and tricks, let me know. I am totally open to constructive criticism. I think I'm gonna go that route though. I mean, that makes sense, right? So if I have a hot wire over to the key, turn the key on, then that puts a hot wire up to the switch, flip my switch on, then that puts power over to the starter as well. Yeah, I think that's what I need to do. If I'm doing something wrong and gonna blow up my Jeep, let me know. So I think I'm gonna change directions a little bit and make my little panel that all these switches are gonna go on. That'll make my wiring easier. I've got a little scrap metal back here. I'm gonna use this to make a little panel for all my switches to go on. See if I can do this with one hand and show you guys. So this little panel here, there we go, fits up there like that. So with this off, I've got this little black panel right here. This really doesn't do anything, so I think I'm gonna make those switches go right there. I got a piece all cut out and molded the best I could after a lot of pounding and banging and bending. But we got it done. I think that'll match up pretty good. Got my little window cut out here. So we're gonna go probably key on this side, switch, and start button just in order. So let's map those out and cut them out. All right, let's piece it together here, see how it all fits. But I think we're in luck. I think it turned out pretty well here. Everything fits nice and snug, just right. Yeah, look at that. I am happy with that. That'll work just fine. I am gonna get a coat of black paint on this and let that dry and get something to eat. In the meantime, check out my next video right up here and have a good day. Cool, let's go paint it.